I'm leaving you, Sarah. She's better than you. The words were so cold, so clean. They didn't seem to belong to my husband, Mark. They hung in the air of our small, sunlit kitchen, a space we had painted together, laughed in, and dreamed in. He didn't even have the decency to look at me when he said it. His eyes were fixed on the open suitcase on the floor, a stark black hole swallowing the life we had built. He was packing his favorite shirts, the ones I always ironed, folding them with a precision that felt both practiced and cruel. I stood by the counter, my hand still gripping a half-peeled potato, the metal of the peeler cold against my skin. My heart, which had been fluttering with excitement just minutes before about the new recipe I was trying for dinner, was now a dead weight in my chest. "What?" I whispered, the sound swallowed by the rustle of fabric as he tossed a pair of jeans into the suitcase. He finally looked up then, and the man I saw wasn't the one who had cried at our wedding or held my hand through my mother's funeral. This was a stranger, his face a mask of impatience and irritation. "Don't make me repeat it," he snapped. "Chloe and I, we're starting a new life, a real life, one where I'm not held back." Held back? The words were a physical blow. I had worked double shifts as a nurse to support us while he launched his graphic design business. I had managed our finances, cooked every meal, and cheered for every minor success he had. I was the foundation he had built his dreams on, and now he was calling me an anchor. "How long?" I asked, my voice shaking. "How long have you been seeing her?" He shrugged, a gesture of such profound indifference that it stole the air from my lungs. "A few months. It doesn't matter. What matters is that she understands me. She wants the same things I do. A family, kids, a future." He spat the word future like it was something I had personally denied him, a treasure I had locked away and refused to share. Every failed fertility treatment, every doctor's appointment that ended in tears, every quiet hope that withered on the vine. He was laying it all at my feet. The blame was a heavy shroud, and he was wrapping me in it so he could walk away clean. "So this is it?" I said, my voice gaining a sliver of strength. "After 7 years, you just pack a bag and walk out? What do you want, Sarah? A dramatic scene? Tears? I'm done. I'm happy for the first time in a long time, and I'm not going to apologize for it." He zipped the suitcase shut with a sound that felt like a final punctuation mark on our marriage. He walked toward the door, not even glancing at the life he was leaving behind. The photos on the fridge, the scuffed hardwood we'd sworn to refinish, the empty space where our future was supposed to be. As his hand touched the doorknob, he paused and turned back to me, a final thought clouding his otherwise clear escape. "Don't call me," he said. "My lawyer will be in touch about the house. It's better if we just make a clean break." And then, I did something that surprised even me. A small, sad smile touched my lips. It wasn't born of humor or happiness. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret, a terrible, world-altering secret, that he was just seconds away from running headfirst into. He saw the smile and frowned, confused by my lack of hysterics. For a moment, he looked like the man I knew again, uncertain and a little lost. But it was too late. He had already made his choice. He shook his head, opened the door, and walked out into his new, better life. I stood there in the echoing silence of the kitchen, the potato still in my hand. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just listened to the sound of his car starting, the engine revving once before fading into the distance. The smile remained on my face, a grim, lonely flag planted in the ruins of my marriage. He thought he was escaping to a brighter future. He had no idea he was walking into a prison of his own making. Brighter future. And I, the wife he had just discarded, was the only one holding the key. 7 years felt like a lifetime ago, a different century, a different me. I met Mark at a chaotic 4th of July barbecue hosted by a mutual friend. I was 25, fresh out of nursing school, and still believed the world operated on a system of fairness and good intentions. He was charming, with a laugh that made his eyes crinkle at the corners, and a way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in a crowded backyard. He wasn't like the other guys I had dated, the ones who talked about their cars or their gym routines. Mark talked about his dreams. He wanted to build a company from the ground up, create art that mattered, and have a house filled with the sounds of children's laughter. He spoke of family not as an obligation, but as the ultimate achievement. Oh, I want a partner, he told me that first night, sitting on a cooler under a sky exploding with fireworks. Someone to build with, not just a house, but a life. I fell for him, hard and fast. We were married a year later, in a simple courthouse ceremony, with only a handful of friends as witnesses. We couldn't afford a big wedding, not with him trying to get his design business off the ground, and me working grueling hours at the hospital. But it didn't matter. We had each other. Our first apartment was a tiny third-floor walk-up with questionable plumbing and walls so thin we knew our neighbor's entire life story. But we made it a home. I remember one Saturday, we spent the entire day painting the living room a soft, buttery yellow. We got more paint on ourselves than on the walls, and we ended up ordering pizza and eating it on the floor, laughing until our sides hurt. One day, he said, wiping a smudge of yellow from my nose with his thumb, we'll have a real house, a backyard, a swing set. His eyes were so full of earnest hope, so full of a future that included me at the very center. That was the Mark I married, the one who brought me soup at the hospital when I had to work a double shift on my birthday. The one who learned how to bake my favorite lemon poppy seed muffins just because he knew they made me smile. The one who would trace patterns on my back until I fell asleep. We started trying for a baby after our second anniversary. It was a joyful, optimistic time. We'd walk through parks and point out families, whispering about what kind of parents we would be. He'd sketch doodles of what our kids might look like in a little notebook he carried everywhere. My eyes, his stubborn cowlick. He was so sure, so confident in the life we were building. The first year of trying passed without success, but we remained hopeful. "These things take time," he'd say, wrapping his arms around me. "The best things always do." We bought our house in our fourth year of marriage. It was a small two-bedroom bungalow with a crooked porch and a big oak tree in the backyard, perfect for that swing set he always talked about. We poured everything we had into it, our savings, our weekends, our shared vision of the future. The second bedroom was destined to be the nursery. We painted it a gentle neutral green, a color of new beginnings. We talked about names, argued playfully over whether our son would be a soccer player or our daughter a scientist. It was the happiest we had ever been, standing in that empty green room, the air thick with possibility. Looking back now, from the wreckage of that same house, it's hard to reconcile that man with the stranger who walked out. That hopeful, loving partner seems like a character from a novel I once read, a ghost whose memory haunts the hallways. He didn't just leave me, he left that version of himself too. He abandoned the man who dreamed of swing sets and painted nursery walls, trading him in for someone colder, harder, and more ambitious. The tragedy wasn't just that he fell out of love with me. It was that he fell out of love with the person he used to be, the person I had built my entire world around. The change was gradual, a slow erosion of the man I knew. It started about a year ago, right around the time Chloe joined his firm. At first, she was just a name he'd mention in passing. Chloe landed the Henderson account. "Chloe has some great ideas for the new campaign." He talked about her with a professional admiration that I, naively, encouraged. "It's good to have a strong team," I'd said. I didn't see the subtle shift in his tone, the way his eyes would light up a little brighter when he said her name. The late nights at the office became more frequent. "We're on a tight deadline," he'd text, hours after he was supposed to be home. Then came the weekend work trips, the hushed phone calls he'd take in the other room, the way he started guarding his phone like it held state secrets. When I asked, he'd get defensive. "It's just work, Sarah. Don't you trust me?" And I did. Or at least, I wanted to. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the stress of our infertility journey was making me see shadows where there were none. Our struggle to conceive had become the silent third resident in our home. After 3 years of trying, we started seeing specialists. There were endless tests, invasive procedures, and a mountain of medical bills. I was the one who managed it all, the appointments, the injections, the rigid schedules. Mark was supportive, but in a detached way. He'd hold my hand in the waiting room, but his mind seemed to be elsewhere, his thumb scrolling endlessly on his phone. With every negative pregnancy test, a little piece of me crumbled. I started to internalize the failure, to believe that my body was the problem, that I was the one letting him down. Maybe it's me, I'd whisper to him at night, tears streaming down my face. Maybe I'm broken. He'd hold me and say, "Don't be silly. We'll figure it out." But his reassurances started to feel hollow, like lines he was reciting from a script. He stopped talking about the nursery. He stopped sketching in his notebook. The future he had once painted so vividly was fading to gray. 6 months ago, our fertility specialist, Dr. Evans, called us in for a final consultation. We had both undergone a new, comprehensive round of genetic and hormonal testing. I remember sitting in her office, my hands clenched in my lap, bracing for more bad news about my own body. Dr. Evans was gentle but direct. "I have the results from both of your tests," she said, her eyes meeting mine with a soft sympathy. "Sarah, all of your results are perfectly normal. There is no medical reason why you shouldn't be able to conceive and carry a child to term." A wave of relief so intense it made me dizzy washed over me. For years, I had carried the weight of this supposed failure. But my relief was cut short by the look on Mark's face. He wasn't relieved. He was tense, his jaw tight. Dr. Evans turned to him. "Mark," she said carefully, "your results are conclusive. You have a condition called non-obstructive azoospermia. It's a genetic condition. It means your body doesn't produce any sperm." The silence in the room was absolute. I couldn't process it. It wasn't me. It had never been me. It was him. Dr. Evans continued, explaining that it was a definitive diagnosis. There were no treatments, no procedures. It was permanent. She handed us a thick, sealed envelope. "The full report is in here, along with resources and information. I suggest you take some time to process this together." I reached for the envelope, but Mark's hand shot out and covered mine. "We don't need that," he said, his voice flat. He stood up abruptly. "Thank you for your time, doctor." He walked out of the office without another word, leaving me sitting there, stunned. I grabbed the envelope and followed him. In the car, he refused to talk about it. "It's just one doctor's opinion," he muttered, staring straight ahead. "They make mistakes all the time." "Mark, we need to read the report," I pleaded. "We need to talk about this." "I don't want to talk about it," he yelled, his voice cracking. "Just drop it, Sarah. Just leave it alone." He never opened the envelope. He shoved it in the back of his desk drawer and refused to acknowledge its existence. From that day on, he was a different person. He retreated into himself, into his work, into his phone. He built a wall around the truth, and he shut me out completely. He let me continue to believe that we, as a couple, were the problem, when all along, he knew the truth. He knew, and he chose to let me live in the dark with him. Mark was gone. The slamming of the front door had echoed through the house, and now, an hour later, the silence was even louder. It pressed in on me from all sides, heavy and suffocating. The half-peeled potato sat on the cutting board, already starting to brown at the edges. A small, absurd monument to a life that had ended just moments ago. I slid down the kitchen cabinets until I was sitting on the cool linoleum floor, my back against the wood. My body was numb, a shell that was going through the motions of breathing while my mind replayed his words on a loop. "She's better than you." A real life. One where I'm not held back. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. He had weaponized our shared grief, our most intimate pain, and used it as his exit strategy. He had made me the villain in a story where he was the only one who had ever lied. For a long time, I just sat there, tracing the patterns on the floor with my finger. The initial shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. It wasn't just about Chloe. It wasn't just about him falling out of love. This was about the secret he couldn't face. The truth was a mirror he had shattered rather than look at his own reflection, and I was just one of the shards he had to sweep away. I pushed myself up, my legs unsteady. I walked out of the kitchen, past the living room filled with memories I could no longer trust, and into our home office. His side of the room was neat and sterile, all chrome and black leather. My side was a chaotic mess of nursing textbooks, half-finished knitting projects, and sticky notes. I went to his desk, the one he had been so proud of, and pulled open the bottom drawer. It was filled with old files and tech magazines, but in the very back, tucked beneath a stack of user manuals, was the thick, sealed envelope from Dr. Evans' office. It was still sealed. In the 6 months since that appointment, he had never once opened it. He had chosen ignorance. He had chosen to let the lie fester between us, rather than confront the truth. My hands were surprisingly steady as I tore open the seal. I didn't need to read it. I already knew what it said. But I needed to see it again. I needed to hold the proof in my hands, to ground myself in the one piece of reality that hadn't been warped by his denial. I spread the pages out on the desk. The medical terminology was dense, but the conclusion was printed in bold, stark black letters. Diagnosis: non-obstructive azoospermia. Prognosis: permanent sterility. There it was. The truth he ran from. The reason he had to create a narrative where I was the broken one, the one holding him back. Because if I wasn't the problem, then he was. And Mark, the man who curated his life like a perfect Instagram feed, couldn't handle being the problem. He needed a scapegoat, and I was the closest one. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. He was starting a new life with Chloe, a life where he could have a family, the one thing he claimed I couldn't give him. The irony was so thick it was almost poetic. He had built his escape on a foundation of lies, not just to me, but to her as well. She probably thought she was getting the whole package. A successful, handsome man, ready to start a family. She had no idea he was selling her a dream he could never deliver. I carefully folded the papers and slid them back into the envelope. I held it in my hands, the weight of it feeling both heavy and liberating. This piece of paper was the truth. It was the story he had refused to read. He had made his choice, walking out that door in a blaze of righteous indignation. He thought he had all the power, that he had left me with nothing but heartbreak and blame. He was wrong. He had left me with the one thing that could dismantle his new life before it even began. I walked back into the living room, the envelope clutched in my hand. I wasn't going to chase him. I wasn't going to expose him out of spite. Not yet. But I also wasn't going to let him rewrite our history. He wanted a clean break? Fine. But a clean break meant facing the truth. And sooner or later, I was going to make sure he read every single word. The truth. The days that followed were a blur of hollowed-out routines. I went to work at the hospital, my nurse's uniform a convenient costume that hid the wreck I was inside. I smiled at patients, charted vitals, and offered comfort I didn't feel myself. No one seemed to notice the dark circles under my eyes, or the way my smile never quite reached them. At home, the silence was a constant companion. I packed his remaining things into boxes, a painful archaeology of our shared life. Each object, a worn-out concert t-shirt, a chipped coffee mug, a dog-eared book, was a fresh stab of betrayal. He hadn't just left me. He had left behind a museum of our love, and I was its reluctant, heartbroken curator. I expected a call from his lawyer, a formal, impersonal severing of our lives. But instead, a week after he left, Mark called me himself. I was sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by boxes, when my phone buzzed. His name flashed on the screen, and my heart gave a painful lurch. I almost didn't answer. Part of me wanted to hurl the phone against the wall, but another, colder part of me took over. I needed to know what he wanted. I answered on the third ring. "Hello," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "Sarah," he said. There was no apology in his tone, no hint of remorse. It was the same flat, businesslike voice he had used in the kitchen. "I need you to do something for me." I almost laughed. Of course he did. Even after shattering my world, he still expected me to be his assistant, his fixer. "What is it, Mark?" I left my portfolio drive in the office, the black lacy drive. It has the final files for the Henderson project. Chloe needs them for a presentation tomorrow. Can you find it and leave it on the porch? I'll swing by and pick it up. The audacity of it was stunning. He was asking me to help him succeed in the new life he was building with the woman he left me for. He wasn't asking, he was instructing, as if I were still his wife, his partner, the person whose job it was to make his life easier. For a moment, I was tempted to tell him to go to hell. I was tempted to say I'd thrown all his things in a dumpster. But then an idea began to form. A quiet, calculated plan. This was my opening. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for. "The drive is here," I said, my voice calm, almost placid. "But I'm not comfortable with you just coming by the house. It's too soon." I let a little tremble enter my voice, playing the part of the wounded wife he expected me to be. There was a sigh on the other end of the line, heavy with his impatience. "Fine. Where do you want to meet? A coffee shop? Can you just do it today? This is really important." "I can meet you," I said. "But not today. I'm working a long shift. How about tomorrow morning? Say 10 a.m.? At the Daily Grind, the one near the hospital." It was a public place, neutral ground. He wouldn't be able to make a scene. He agreed, the relief in his voice palpable. He thought he was getting what he wanted. He thought I was just another task to be managed, another loose end to be tied up. He had no idea that I wasn't just bringing him a hard drive. After I hung up, I walked into the office and found the drive right where he said it would be. I placed it in my purse. Then, I went to my own desk drawer and took out the thick envelope from Dr. Evans' office. I slipped it into my bag right next to the drive. I spent the rest of the night rehearsing what I would say, what I wouldn't say. This wasn't about revenge, I told myself. It wasn't about hurting him the way he had hurt me. It was about truth. It was about reclaiming the narrative he had stolen from me. He had walked away, believing he was the hero of his own story, escaping a broken, inadequate wife for a better life. Tomorrow, I was going to show him the real script. I was going to make him read the one page he had spent the last 6 months pretending didn't exist. The Daily Grind was bustling with the morning rush. The air smelled of burnt coffee and steamed milk, a familiar, comforting scent that did little to calm the frantic beating of my heart. I chose a small table in the corner, a place with a clear view of the door, but enough privacy for what was about to happen. I ordered a black tea I had no intention of drinking, and waited. Mark arrived at 10:02, 2 minutes late, a power move I was all too familiar with. He looked good, annoyingly good. He was wearing a new, expensive-looking wool coat and a crisp white shirt. He was already inhabiting his new life, and it seemed to suit him. He spotted me and walked over, his expression a careful mixture of pity and impatience. "Hey," he said, not sitting down. "Did you bring it?" He was all business, treating this like a transaction. I motioned to the chair opposite me. "Sit down, Mark. Just for a minute." He hesitated, then sighed and sat, perching on the edge of the seat as if ready to bolt at any moment. "Look, Sarah, I don't want this to be a big thing. Let's just keep it simple." "I agree," I said, my voice steady. I reached into my purse and placed the black hard drive on the table. His eyes lit up with relief, and he reached for it. My hand covered his before he could touch it. "Not yet," I said softly. His eyes narrowed. "What is this? Are you trying to hold my work hostage?" I knew this was a mistake. "I'm not holding anything hostage," I said calmly, removing my hand. "I just want to talk. You owe me that much, don't you?" He leaned back, crossing his arms, the picture of a man being deeply inconvenienced. "Fine. You have 5 minutes. What is it? Do you need money? Is that what this is about?" "No, Mark. I don't want your money." I looked him straight in the eye, letting the mask of the heartbroken wife fall away. "I want to talk about the future. Your future. With Chloe." He scoffed. "What about it?" "We're happy. We're moving in together next month, and we're going to start a family right away. The kind of family I always wanted." There it was. The final twisting of the knife. He didn't even realize he was doing it. He thought he was just stating a fact, a simple, happy truth about his new life. He was using our most profound pain as a casual talking point. My resolve hardened into something unbreakable. "That sounds wonderful," I said. my voice betraying no emotion. A big, happy family. It's what you deserve. He looked at me, surprised by my placid response. Yeah, well, I'm glad you're being mature about this. Oh, I am, I said. Now I'm being incredibly mature. So mature, in fact, that I brought you something. A gift, you could say, for your new beginning. I reached into my purse again. His eyes flickered with suspicion, then curiosity. He probably thought it was an old photo, some sentimental piece of trash I was going to use to guilt trip him. Instead, I pulled out the thick, cream-colored envelope from Dr. Evans' office. It felt heavy in my hand, heavy with the unspoken truth that had been poisoning our lives for months. I slid it across the table, stopping it right next to the hard drive. He stared at it, his brow furrowed in confusion. He recognized it instantly. I saw the flash of recognition, followed by a wave of defensive anger. "What is that?" he asked, though he already knew. "I told you to get rid of that." "You told me to ignore it," I corrected gently. "But I think you should read it. You can't start a new life without knowing the full truth about the old one." His face paled. "I don't need to read it. I know what it says. It's a bunch of medical nonsense." "Is it?" I tilted my head. "Because I think it's the most important document you'll ever read, especially now. Consider it essential reading before you start trying for that family with Chloe." I stood up, leaving the hard drive and the envelope sitting side by side on the table. The choice was his past and his future, all laid out on a small cafe table. "You can have the drive, Mark. It's all yours. But I really think you should open the envelope first." I gave him one last long look, then turned and walked away, not looking back. I didn't need to see his face. I could already imagine it. I didn't go far. I walked out of the daily grind and crossed the street, stepping into the sterile, impersonal lobby of the medical building opposite. Stepping from the large plate glass window, I had a perfect, unobstructed view of the corner table where Mark still sat. I told myself it was for closure, that I needed to see this through to the very end. But if I was being honest, a small, dark part of me wanted to witness the moment his carefully constructed world came crashing down. For a long time, he just stared at the two items on the table, the hard drive representing his future, the envelope his past. He picked up the drive, then put it down. He ran a hand through his hair, his confident posture from minutes ago completely gone. He looked trapped. The cafe buzzed around him, people laughing and chatting, oblivious to the personal apocalypse unfolding in their midst. Finally, with a deep, shaky breath, he pushed the hard drive aside and pulled the envelope toward him. His fingers trembled as he tore it open, a clumsy, jagged rip. He pulled out the sheaf of papers and began to read. I watched his face as he scanned the first page. At first, there was just confusion, his brow furrowed as he tried to decipher the medical jargon. Then, as he got to the summary, the diagnosis, his body went rigid. The color drained from his face, leaving his skin a pasty, sickly gray. His eyes, wide with disbelief, scanned the lines again, and then a third time, as if hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something else, something less final. I saw his hand, the one not holding the report, clench into a tight fist on the table. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He looked up, his gaze sweeping frantically around the cafe, before landing on the window where I stood. Our eyes met across the busy street. The arrogance was gone. The pity was gone. All that was left was a raw, primal terror. It was the look of a man who had just learned that the very ground he was standing on was an illusion. He had built his entire identity, his escape, his future, on the premise of his own virility and my supposed failure. He had cast himself as the potent hero leaving the barren wife, and in the space of a few short paragraphs, that entire narrative had been obliterated. The report didn't just say he was sterile, it explained in cold, clinical detail that it was a congenital, irreversible condition. He had never been able to have children. He never would be. The family he dreamed of with Chloe was a biological impossibility. He couldn't give her what I couldn't. He couldn't give it to anyone. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers clumsy, and I saw him dial a number. He put the phone to his ear, his eyes still locked on me, pleading, accusing, and utterly broken. I didn't need to hear the conversation to know he was calling Chloe. Probably to postpone, to lie, to buy himself time to figure out how to spin this new, catastrophic truth. A small, sad smile touched my lips, and I gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of my head. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel a surge of vengeful glee. What I felt was a profound, aching sadness. Sadness for the man he used to be, sadness for the love we had lost, and sadness for the fact that it had to come to this. This was the consequence of his cowardice. He had refused to face this truth with me, as a partner, so now he had to face it alone, as a stranger in a coffee shop, with his whole new life hanging by a thread. I watched him hang up the phone, his shoulders slumping in defeat. He buried his face in his hands, a man completely undone. I had seen him cry before, but this was different. This wasn't grief. It was the shattering of an ego, the death of a lie he had clung to for survival. I held his gaze for one final moment, then turned away from the window. I had seen enough. I walked out of the medical building and into the bright, cold morning air. I didn't look back. There was nothing left for me there. He had his truth now. What he chose to do with it was no longer my problem. Life after Mark became a study in quiet reclamation. I moved out of the house we had shared, leaving behind the ghosts and the garden we never finished. I found a small, bright apartment in a different part of the city, one with a balcony that overlooked a park instead of a street filled with memories. The first few months were about rediscovering the person I was when no one else was looking. I was not just a nurse, not just a wife, not just the woman who couldn't have a baby. I was Sarah. I started hiking on my days off, feeling the burn in my lungs and the solid earth beneath my feet. I rejoined the book club I'd abandoned years ago because Mark thought it was dorky. I filled my apartment with plants and slowly, painstakingly, learned how to keep them alive. I was building a life that belonged only to me, and it was a fragile but beautiful thing. I didn't hear from him directly, but news travels in small circles. A former neighbor mentioned she'd seen him moving out of the bungalow. A colleague at the hospital said she'd heard from a friend that Chloe had broken off the engagement. Apparently, the dream of a big, happy family was a non-negotiable part of her 5-year plan. I felt a pang of something, not pity for him, but a strange, distant empathy for the mess he had created. He had lost everything, not because of me, but because of the lies he told himself. One evening, about 6 months after our meeting at the cafe, I received a letter. It was forwarded from my old address, the handwriting on the envelope unfamiliar. It was from Mark's mother. I almost threw it away, but my curiosity got the better of me. The letter was short and surprisingly devoid of the usual blame I'd expected. "Dear Sarah," it began, "I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I needed to write it. Mark told me everything. Not at first, but after Chloe left him, the truth finally came out. I'm so sorry for the pain my son caused you. I'm sorry that I never saw how much he was struggling and how much of that struggle he unfairly placed on you. He is getting help now, therapy. He has a long way to go. I hope one day you find the happiness you have always deserved." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. It wasn't an absolution, and it didn't erase the scars, but it was a quiet closing of a painful chapter. It was an acknowledgement that the truth, however brutal, had finally set us all free in its own way. Today, a year has passed. I am still a nurse, but I've been promoted to charge nurse on the pediatric floor. I spend my days surrounded by the laughter and tears of children, and it doesn't hurt anymore. The ache of what I couldn't have has been replaced by the quiet joy of what I can give. I'm good at my job. I'm calm in a crisis. I can hold a scared child's hand and make them believe everything will be okay. I am strong, not because I endured a great betrayal, but because I chose to heal from it. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on my balcony at sunset, watching the families play in the park below, I think of Mark. I don't think of him with anger or bitterness. I think of him as a lesson in the destructive power of secrets and the quiet strength of facing the truth. He thought leaving me was the answer, that a new woman would solve the problem he refused to name. But the problem was never me. It was the lie he carried inside him. I'm happy now, in a way that is deeper and more resilient than before. It's not the giddy happiness of a new romance, but the steady, peaceful happiness of self-worth. I am enough on my own. And as for the future, I don't know. Maybe I'll adopt a child someday. Maybe I'll travel. Maybe I'll just continue to build this quiet, beautiful life for myself. The nursery in my old house is probably an office now, or a guest room, its green walls painted over. But that's okay. Some dreams aren't meant to come true. They're just meant to teach you what you're capable of surviving.